I think we are familiar with this at this point, so we can move forward. So we're going to take a look at the question we have in front of us. It's been 15 years since the first blockchain was implemented quite successfully, right? Bitcoin is very successful. It was disruptive, it was innovative, it has changed the financial industry. So what is the reason that we don't see blockchain implemented everywhere? 15 years is a long time in a technology's history. Most of the time, new technologies, if they are solving a problem well, they get adopted just like that, right? Look at the social media. I mean, everybody is using it, the smartphones and so on, but not blockchain. So what is the reason? So we're going to take a look at it, and the reason it is helpful to us to take a look at why the blockchain lags behind the hype is because it informs us. It helps us understand what are the challenges in its adoption and implementation, so we keep those in mind when we get into the discussion of how is it applied, and also strategic implementation of blockchain, which will be tomorrow's topic and Monday's topic mostly. So this is Michael Manelli and Alistair Milne in a paper that they talked about this, that it seems to promise a major change in the capital markets and other financial services. Some say it may ultimately prove to be as important as innovation as the internet itself, but few can say exactly how or why. And the reason for that is that I think perhaps except Satoshi Nakamoto and a few of those people who are doing this blockchain development day in and day out, nobody else really totally understands all the ins and out of it. And the reason for that is that these are the different disciplines that are involved in it. So it's not a trivial thing. So we have computer science, because the software development, the architecture of the blockchain, the system design, all has to be managed. So you need expertise in computer science to enable that. You need somebody who is expert in cryptography, who can ensure the different algorithms that have to be used, what's the appropriate algorithms for creating hash and so on, to ensure data integrity and security. You need economics for designing what should be the most appropriate incentive system and creating tokens. How do you, if you're talking about tokenization, remember we were talking about like the artwork or real estate or a house. How do you go about doing it? It's not a trivial problem to solve. You have to be an economist or have a good understanding in order to do that. Finance, for obvious reasons, right? For payments and so on. Law, you need to be aware of what are the regulatory framework within which you are operating. Is the ownership that you are given through a token or an NFT, is that valid and legal in the rule of justice or in the courts, right? So those are all the things that you have to be aware of and understand before you jump into blockchain. Obviously, business understanding, business domain understanding. Without understanding what your business is and what is the problem and what are the ins and outs and what are the challenges, it is very difficult to bring in any technology, let alone something like blockchain. I don't know how many of you here are information system students or have taken a course in information system, but typically the rate of failure of technology adoption and implementation is extremely high. We're talking about like 75, 80%, sometimes 90% failure rate. That's significant. And usually it has nothing to do with the technology itself. It has to do with the people who are adopting it, the businesses not thinking it through, they're not strategic in its adoption and implementation and all kinds of things. So most of these factors are non-technology related that lead to the failure of technology adoption. Because I'm in the information system field, and those of you who are, you probably have seen that there's like billions and billions of dollars, and I'm sure in India the thousands of crores of rupees are spent each year by small to big organizations and government in getting this new system, and then it doesn't work. Most of them don't make the news headline because the Nobody's paying attention to it anymore, right? But it's a huge thing. So business domain understanding and knowledge is very, very critical. Mathematics, of course, you know, we were talking about Byzantine fault tolerance. Byzantine fault tolerance is one of the things that coming from mathematics. How many of us know that level of mathematics? Very, very few. Unless you are a PhD in mathematics, you may not understand all the ins and outs of it. Data science, obviously, right? Whenever we are talking about data, we are talking about analytics, data mining. Cybersecurity, we have been talking about nothing but cybersecurity this morning. So that's a discipline in itself. It's not like a cybersecurity is one little thing. It's a whole field in itself. The interface, UX, UI, interface design, right? When I was talking about earlier about information systems failing, a lot of them fail because the system design was so poor, the interface was so poor that the users couldn't figure out how to use, or to use something it requires, you know, 5 clicks, and people just gave up. You know what, I'll go and use the old way, that was much better instead of this stupid thing. So that is again a whole discipline in itself. You know the story of Apple, right? Apple became Apple because it paid a lot of attention to the interface design. It understood that people want simple, they don't want to have to fuss, and that's the main difference between Apple and Windows systems. In Windows system, you have to be able to know the folder structure, the files, and so on. Apple is all of a black box. So depending on who you are, I personally prefer to know where my file is sitting so I can retrieve it whenever I want it. But a lot of people love Apple because they don't want to have to think about it. They just let the system do it. So that makes a lot of difference in how something is being used. Supply chain, obviously, that is a whole field in itself. Even though it's part of operations management, these days things have ballooned so much that you have these subfields becoming a field by themselves. I have a colleague who does nothing but supply chain, and actually he specializes in agribusiness supply chain, which is also much more complex than other supply chains. Environmental science, why do you think environmental science comes into the picture here? The damage to the environment, and not everybody may be rushing out to hire an environmental engineer when they are designing a blockchain, but they should. And education, right? Going back to the high failure rate, it's usually because somebody will decide about adopting a system and then plunk it right in front of the user. Okay, here it is, go and start using it. That doesn't happen, right? People have to be trained, they have to be motivated, especially in an organization. We use social media and all because it's entertaining for us, and it's, you know, we like to use it. So that is our incentive. But in an organization, an employee has to be motivated to change their behavior. And if that motivation is not there, they are not going to do it. Especially if the system is difficult to use or is very complex and so on, which blockchain is all of that. So this gives you at least a quick idea about why blockchain implementation is not a straightforward business decision, or designing it is not a simple matter of just hiring a coder or being a computer science expert and designing it. It's a very complex system if you want to do it well. So you need, because blockchain relies heavily on cryptography, we talked about hashing, digital signatures, public-private keys, but we have only just touched the surface, right? We just know the terminology. We don't know exactly how it operates, or how do you account for different scenarios. When this happens, what should happen and what shouldn't happen, and so on and so forth. So decentralized network, again, you need telecommunication network expertise to be able to figure out how these different nodes are going to operate in a particular, how do they participate, and how do they get the information or the ledger broadcast to them, what would be the computing power needed, what would be the telecommunication network capacity needed, you know, what's the minimum requirements, and so on and so forth. And when people are moving from centralized to decentralized, over time we have become used to a centralized way of operations, right? We know in the school there is a principal or there is a class teacher, right, who we listen to. In offices, we know there is a boss who we are supposed to listen to. In a classroom, I hope not, but generally the teacher is supposed to be the expert, right? So we have at home we have the parents who are our boss, you know. So we are used to that authority system. So it's very jarring for a lot of us when suddenly we have this decentralized system and we are the full boss of something. For some people that's very liberating, but for others it can be very intimidating. What do I do now? You know, tell me something. You know, I'm getting nervous about this. You know, I'm supposed to be responsible now, and so on. So a lot of these, in fact, one of the things that should be added on that list is a psychology expertise also. Having an understanding of how people behave and how they think. So this is what this is talking about, that they struggle to trust decentralized system, because we always have this inherent, there must be somebody. Remember all those conspiracy theories, they come from that, because we refuse to believe the obvious, so there must be something behind it. It can't be just this simple or this easy or this something. So the other thing is this immutable leisure is a foreign concept for most of us, because we are used to, you know, we can change it. We'll just go ahead and do it, and then of course we can change it. So that change in behavior in an organization where you have to make sure it is absolutely perfect, the data that you want to upload into the blockchain, that takes a while for people to get used to, because, you know, why? Because, you know, of course it is good, but, you know, we'll take care of it later. That's what we have been doing before. So that's kind of a mind change that a lot of people need a lot of time with. So this is talking about business domain knowledge. Again, we have talked about it. That cryptocurrency is one thing, but blockchain applications in a business require a deep understanding of the business itself and how things work. And we're not talking about just that business, especially in a supply chain where you have manufacturers and transporters and farmers or miners or whosoever is producing the original good and to the shelf. So everything in between, you need to have an understanding. So finance to logistics, same thing with smart contracts. You require legal knowledge to be able to understand that is the smart contract that you are executing or being a part of, is it adhering to the legal principles or not. And of course the jargon and terminology, right? Remember unspent transaction outputs, thank you, UTXOs, right? Why, right? It would have been so much better balance at hand, like that professor, he said, Professor Suman, thank you. So there's a lot of jargon that is there that's hard for people who are not computer scientists or mathematicians or statisticians to wrap their head around it. So everything becomes more complex if the terminology you have to deal with is even more complex. Things like hashing or forking or mining and gas fees and Byzantine fault tolerance, you know. So that makes it intimidating for most people, because if people don't understand something, they are more resistant to working with it. It's a you know, normal human nature. So, and then of course rapidly evolving terminology. So first it was cryptocurrencies, then the smart contracts, so now it is NFTs and non-fungible tokens. What is fungible? What is this? You know, so it makes everything that much more complex for people. And of course now, yesterday we heard Mr. Afzal talk about layer 2 solutions and so on, which we will talk about I think tomorrow. So what is this layer? What is layer 1, or is it layer 3 or layer 0? And you know, so all of those things, some of it is there in most technologies, but for some reason blockchain seems to have more than its fair share of this jargon that is very hard to comprehend for non-computer scientists or non-mathematicians and not statisticians. And most of the people who are going to adopt and implement are none of those people, right? So they are on the development side.
What is gas fee?
Gas fee is the, sorry, who asked the question? Oh, you did. Transaction fee or the amount, actually not the transaction fee, sorry, it's the amount of money you have spent in consensus mechanism, like how much was my electricity bill today because I was on blockchain for 2 hours or whatever. So that's kind of like gas is the term used in United States for fuel, like what do we call it here? Petrol fees, yeah. So when I first went to United States, I was kind of like, what is this gas? We don't fill it with gas, but they call gasoline is what they call it instead of petrol. Invisible technology. We inherently tend to distrust black boxes. What is going on inside there? That seems like magic. There must be something going on that I don't understand that is going to come and bite me, or it's going to impact me negatively later on. So we are talking about our human tendencies that become exaggerated when we are talking about complex systems that are hard for us to decipher and expensive also. So all our fears come into the fore, and we tend to then be even more resistant than we normally would. So it's most of the information system that we deal with. For example, your registration system or your e-commerce, like when you go to Amazon, you have a same kind of interface. Doesn't matter what you're buying or from which location. As long as you go to Amazon, it's always the same interface. That's very comforting. Same thing with your mobile banking. It's always the same kind of interface. And I think I'm noticing that most banks pretty much use a similar kind of interface. There is a reason for that, that once people get used to one interface, then they can switch over to your bank comfortably without having to relearn where, you know, everything is. In blockchain, typically you don't have those kind of interfaces, and it can change depending on which blockchain, which industry, which use case, and so on. So it's like quantum computing. How many of you have heard about quantum computing or just quantum physics? Some of you. So famously, I forget the name of the physicist who said, I do quantum physics, it's physics, but I don't understand it, because it's very, very hard to describe what it is. Because, you know, to say something at this point, it's probability that it's an electron here or there, and what do you mean? It's, you know, I exist, I am made up of electrons and subatomic particles, but I exist, I can feel my skin. So it's a very, very abstract concept for us to wrap our heads around. Same thing with parallel universes, right? I mean, more and more physics is leaning towards that we live in a universe that has parallel universes, but it's very hard for us to comprehend. Not that same level, but similar kind of you know, thing exists. You guys have done a great job of understanding the basic flow of what the blockchain is and what consensus is and how the hashing works and what a block is and block header and so on. But for most people, it's very, very difficult to understand. What do you mean, you know, that somebody is going to solve a problem and then it gets added, or, you know, it's just weird. It's hard for us to compare anytime you have a decentralized system, because most systems are centralized. So that in itself is very hard for people to, even in a democracy, you have prime minister or ministers or presidents who are making the decisions on our behalf. So it's really more like a delegated proof of stake, right? In a democracy, we elect people to do the work on our behalf. But in a totally decentralized system, it's like I am responsible for defense ministry and home ministry and everything by myself. We will go berserk, right? So that's part of the problem or challenge of dealing with blockchain technology. In fact, one of the things I want to hear from Mr. Vivek Pandey is how does he talk to his clients to make them understand what blockchain is, because as a entrepreneur and as a consultant, you only have few minutes. I mean, we have been here at it for what, 3 days now, and we are just beginning to wrap our heads around it. He and others probably have like 5 minutes to explain that why blockchain is a good idea. So I would like to hear like how does he explain it to his clients to without going into all this jargon. And then the other thing is, most people when they think of blockchain, they think of Bitcoin or cryptocurrencies, which sometimes has negative connotations now because cryptocurrency goes down. A lot of people lost a lot of money in cryptocurrencies. There was a big hype that all governments are going to use cryptocurrency, and now suddenly many governments have made the rule that no cryptocurrency can ever be used, including India, although there are cryptocurrencies being used in government transactions. It's very confusing and negatively associated. So therefore, by association, blockchain becomes more negatively tainted. Same thing, this skepticism and myth. This is the biggest myth, that blockchain is unhackable. No, it can be hacked. Everything can be hacked, given enough resources and enough time. And that blockchain is inherently anonymous. That's also not true, because given enough time, somebody can figure out who is the person who's doing what kind of transactions and so on. So therefore, more skepticism there is, it's harder to trust a technology, and therefore harder for us to adopt it. So I think we have talked about this before. So scalability and energy use. So here's the other thing, that is most organizations are looking for low cost solutions, right? I mean, that's a natural tendency. So this is something that was a surprise for me when I was doing the research, when I was making this presentation, that the cost of each transaction is so high. And this cost includes the energy cost and all the other things. So that's $5 to $10 US. So we're talking about what? About 400 rupees to 800 or 900 rupees per transaction. That's steep, right? Very steep. And that makes it therefore scalability, even if it is available, do you want to scale it up and therefore incur that much cost? So as a business person, as an economist or a finance person, you have to think about return on investment. And then of course, if you change the consensus mechanism, then you get into a little bit more centralization and other issues that we talked about before. So not a low cost solution. Okay, so this was actually what we were supposed to have done yesterday. That's okay. So here, this is where today's actually was designed more to be use cases. So the idea here is, and we have about half an hour, so maybe what we can do is I wanted us to do a quick case study, and I don't know, you don't have access to the actual link. So what I'll do is I'll try, hopefully the links will work. I'll open it here, and we can at least scan through it to the best of our ability and try and just have a quick discussion around each. That would be better than me going on and on about it. So supply chain is where we are focusing, because this is a huge place where blockchain applications and implementation is happening. So again, we have suppliers. They are the ones who supply the raw materials. Producers, distributors, retailers, customers. They may have different names in different countries and so on, but essentially these are the people who are participating in a supply chain. Okay. So I think again we have talked about this enough. So traceability and transparency, again we have talked about this before, so I'm going to skip it. The key point here is that blockchain enables higher level of traceability and transparency. Again, I think this is also, we have talked about this before. Reduced paperwork. I went to some of the offices in the past. I don't know how it is now after digitization effort, but you remember those huge number of files everywhere in every corner of the. So the digitization was an attempt to try and reduce the paperwork, so things are a little more effort. You don't have to find the file and flip through to find a particular record or a transaction. So the idea here is to streamline documentation even further and no need for it, or even having to store it on your hard drive anywhere and having backups. So for example, in finance, custom clearance, we keep coming back to custom clearance. In shipping industry, this is being used a lot. So there is this big company, Maersk, which is a leader in the shipping. They are the ones who transport goods from via oceans, from port to port. And they are using IBM's TradeLens platform. It's a customized blockchain platform designed for shipping industry, and actually it was developed for Maersk, and there's several case studies out there about it. The idea was to digitize all the shipping documentation to reduce delays and manual errors. So it has, and the stakeholders are pretty much companies, port operators, and government agencies. And the technology that is used is permission blockchain on Hyperledger. It's a type of blockchain. I think I have a handout that I will upload. I have mentioned it before. Hopefully I'll check after this session is over if I have the permission or not. I'll try to do it this afternoon. As you can imagine, this is a very, very critical infrastructure issue, right? Ports and shipping and so on, because we know about terrorism and we know about all the issues with suitcase bombs, nuclear bombs, and so on and so forth. So all governments are invested in having technology such as this, because it's not just one government's problem, it's most governments' problem. So that becomes an incentive for them to collaborate and work on something like this. I think again we kind of are familiar with this one. So ethical sourcing of material. Can anybody give me an example of where this becomes from your newspaper readings or something? Have you heard of blood diamonds? Anybody? No? So, you know, the diamonds come from usually African countries, and De Beers is one of the biggest companies, which DE space BEERS, De Beers, is a company that's, so they pay people to mine the diamonds, and then they sell it, supply it to the rest of the world, and diamonds are very expensive. We all love diamonds, right? The problem is that the conditions of those workers and those mines is horrific, and that's why they are called blood diamonds, meaning that people paid with their lives to mine those diamonds, because companies are not, they are profit oriented, right? And a lot of companies such as De Beers and others, as long as nobody knows about it, they don't care. So they're paying very little, sometimes it's slave labor, and the conditions under which they are working to mine these diamonds is so horrific that they die or they fall sick, and there is no health care, and so on. So once the consumers started becoming aware, and some people started talking about it, that, you know, this is not right, that all these diamonds we are getting in Tiffany's that are selling for you know, lakhs of rupees or dollars, the people who actually made it happen are dying or have died or merely surviving. So that is not right, because most of the profits is going to these companies. So they started banning, some practices were put in place. So the idea is to make sure that if I'm purchasing a diamond, I know where it came from, and if it is coming from one of those places where the conditions are awful, then I hopefully will not buy it, because I want to buy diamond which is not stained by somebody's blood. So that is what the idea of ethical sourcing is, and it applies to many other fields. These days, you know, all our devices, they require these rare materials, right? Everybody know that? We not just the mercury, gold, you know, there are all kinds of rare materials, and those have to be mined. And again, a lot of these resources are in very poor countries, and in those poor countries, people will work for whatever you give them because they need to survive. So again, there is a sourcing, you know, where is it coming from? Are there ethical practices? Coffee beans is another example that you might have heard about, that people who grow the coffee beans and what they pay to the companies is hardly anything compared to what these companies then sell it for. And the reason is because they have monopolies. These companies have, so if they don't sell it to these companies, then who's going to buy their coffee beans? So all of these things are still going on, including the slave labor. Believe it or not, we think that we live in a world where nobody is enslaving another person, but it happens, and it happens openly. It's just that it doesn't get talked about because we are so busy liking the celebrity who is, I don't know, doing whatever. So the point is that sustainability and ethical practices is becoming more and more part of a supply chain management as something to consider, not just something as a side thing, especially for big companies. And that's the good thing about activism, that more activism results in at least companies trying to make an effort to do something about it. So because blockchain records are immutable, companies cannot deny if something did indeed come from unethical sourcing, and therefore they may have to pay the penalty, either monetary or brand reputation or whatever it is. So we have a few more minutes. So do we want to do any discussion questions? Let's do one or two. I think I'm gonna, we kind of know the first two, right? Let's take a little bit of look at, are there limitations or risks associated with implementing blockchain in supply chain? So can we again do the same thing we were doing earlier? Let's take no more than 5 minutes to discuss amongst yourselves and come up with 2 or 3 things that you think are made worse, or new challenges introduced because of using blockchain in supply chain. It's okay, you know, we are just kind of giving a free rein to our imagination here. So at 12:15, I'm going to ask people to start raising their hands. You can think of a specific scenario, specific industry, or a specific process. Instead of trying to think of all supply chain management, think about something that you're familiar with, and if blockchain was introduced in it, what risks might be associated, including you as a consumer.
Adding up to the digital divide as it worsens the ratio of haves, have-nots and haves.
That's a good point, yeah. It may make haves and have-nots, especially which companies in the which supply chain are able to participate in blockchain. So do the smaller businesses, smaller farmers, do they get left out, or are there provisions built to make sure that they don't get left behind? Okay, keep thinking, that's a good point. Anybody else? That gentleman and then you. Yeah.
So as far as I have understood, one of the major limitations is the scalability. So the scalability, like even in the Walmart's case, they also face some scalability issue. So that is one thing. Like in implementing the blockchain, that is one limitation.
So it's not going to be simply substituting the traditional system with a new system because scalability in blockchain is an issue. So that is one of the reasons why, you know, customs and so on, where it's not real time, well, it is real time in some cases, but it's different than e-commerce or something like that. So that is something, that's a good point. And then you had your
high cost and complex,
high cost, yeah.
and it is complex. Moreover, the high consumption of the energy.
So who do you think the cost will be transferred to when companies, supply chain management companies adopt? Consumers. So it's going to be you and I who will end up paying for the higher cost of something. And of course, higher impact on environment, we all pay for it ultimately. Okay, good point. Anybody else?
Stakeholders may resist adopting this due to lack of their knowledge.
They are, yeah. So you have to have a strong education component, especially when you are talking about people who are doing the production or manufacturing or whatever. They don't understand what is happening or why do they have to have a new processes in place and so on. So there is a lot of work that needs to be done to make sure that everybody understands why and how, and given the resources, right? If you're a coffee bean grower, and then you have to, at the end of the day, upload your transaction instead of on an Excel spreadsheet in a Google sheet that is then shared with your supplier. Now you have a completely different process. So then, you know, you have to be given enough time and incentivized to do it. Any other point?
Cyber attacks.
Cyber attacks, yeah. So do you think implementation of blockchain would make it worse?
Because if at any single point of failure can affect the supply chain process.
So blockchain posits that it will make it more secure. But I think what you might be saying is that there are new methods of attack that can always come. Anytime you have a new lock, people invent new ways to break the lock, right? So it's kind of the same thing. Okay. Anybody else?
Lack of standards.
Lack of standards, that's actually a very good point. Even something as simple as chargers, right? You have a different charger for every phone, and then the other thing is, like, I travel so much from US to India, and it's such a pain that in this 21st century I still have to buy the adapters, and you know, it's just nonsense. So that's just a very small thing. So when you think about something like a supply chain management spread across the globe, and the metric system and the not using the metric system and the time difference and all of those things, and then not just the electricity standard like 120 volts versus 240 volts, even the standards on internet and telecommunication may not necessarily be the same everywhere. So all of the, or the security requirements, how robust they are. So in pharmaceutical industry especially, that becomes a major issue, that in or patient records and so on. So you know, there's all these different things that require certain standards, but they may be different across. So how do you reconcile to make sure that we don't run into the problem which the US did? I think 20 or so years ago, they sent orbit in collaboration with the European Space Agency. They sent a probe for Mars, and it failed spectacularly because somebody somewhere in the code forgot to make the conversion from metric to feet, because US uses imperial system and the rest of the world uses metric system. So just that slight one mistake caused failure of, so many people's hard work. Forget about the money part, which itself is huge, but so many people were looking forward to the scientists and all those people, and imagine God, I try to imagine and I feel so bad. So any other? Hanji?
Reduction in speed as user base increase.
Right, that of course is always the telecommunication network that you are dealing with, and its capacity and capability. Anybody else? Okay, so let me see where we are. Kahan gaya mera clicker? Oh, there it is. I think you guys have covered all of these things very well, so that's fantastic. I'm trying to think of anything that we didn't touch on. Data privacy concerns, I think it's comes under that lack of standards and so on. And regulatory uncertainty, that of course we talked about that, if it is spread across the globe, you have to consider that. So good, we are good with this. So we have this case study from PricewaterhouseCoopers.com. Let me see if we can. Okay, so I'm going to skip through this. I think we talked about this earlier today about identity and access management. That in itself is also a subfield within cybersecurity now. I think we talked about this also, right? IoT security. Does everybody know what is IoT? And what is it? Where do you think they might be used?
Home appliances.
And usually in supply chain management, so you may have your shipments with IoT devices, so it makes it easy. So remember, blockchain by itself is useless unless the data is being generated, right? So data is generated by a different variety, by a human being or by these sensors such as an IoT device. So shipments may have different shipments depending on what level. Sometimes it could be individual mangoes, for example, that could have an IoT device like an RFID chip. So that is then generating the data. That data then helps in traceability and other things that you're doing using business analytics, and then the blockchain comes into that picture. So this is what I wanted to do. I think we have, how much time do we have? I know 12:30 we are supposed to be meeting with Mr. Is Ayushi or any of those people here? Ankita? What is the time frame? Is it 12:30 or do we leave a little bit early? I don't know. So is Mr. Pandey going to come here, or where is he going to come? Where are we supposed to go after this? अच्छा, कहाँ पर हैं? आ रहे हैं वो या कहाँ हैं? हाँ, please check करके बता दीजिए. So in the meantime, let's attempt it. If we can, maybe it's okay. Otherwise, we'll just take a break. So this was the link. It's basically a small case study of this system called Guard Time, and it is about healthcare records, and it's an article about how Guard Time is increasing healthcare security with blockchain technology. So what I was hoping for, okay, so then maybe we are not going to do that, because I think logistically I don't think it will work, because the idea was that if people had computers or something, they could pull it up and read the article. It's a short article, and then fill out these things as a. So how are we feeling? So what did we do today that was different from day 2 and day 1?
Challenges.
Mostly we focused on challenges of blockchain, which is important consideration for us. It's one thing to understand what blockchain is, but it's equally important to understand what could be the issues with it, so that when we get into the strategic implementation, we understand. And the purpose of these mini case studies was exactly that, but we'll see if we can make it happen. If not, that's okay, we'll do something else tomorrow. So thank you again for your attention and engagement and knowing all the answers. So I'm looking forward to our conversation with Mr. Vinay Pandey. Ask good questions. You are well armed now with the knowledge to ask the good questions. And I'll see you tomorrow at 9:30. Thank you. इसको बंद करो।